All right, welcome to the July edition of the Key Ministry Disability Ministry Video Roundtable. And today our topic is Ask a Behavior Specialist. So my name is Beth Golick from Key Ministry. I'm joined by my colleague, Catherine Boyle, who is our Director of Mental Health Ministry. But we have some special guests on today too. So from Full Spectrum Behavior and Analysis, did I get the title right? Okay, so we have Dr. Bryant and Dr. Bellotti, and is your colleague here as well? I think he's down.
He's attending, Colin.
Yes. Okay, great. Okay, so Colin's here as well. So today you get to ask your questions, everybody. So you can put them in the chat, you can raise your hand, unmute yourself and ask your question. But I know that at Key Ministry, we do get questions like, what do we do in this particular situation? So here's your opportunity to get some answers. And I do have some questions that were submitted to me beforehand as well. So I'll pipe in if there's any lull in the conversation. So would anybody, actually, I'll open it up. Dr. Bryant and Dr. Bellotti, do you want to start by telling us a little bit about what you do and how we had this conversation a few months ago?
Absolutely. And so I can start. So I'm Dr. Jennifer Bellotti. I'm the Executive Vice President of Full Spectrum ABA. I've been with the organization for almost 5 years now in many different roles. And in this current position, I oversee all clinical services, a lot of our bigger projects and programs that happen within the organization, including Bible-based ABA, which Dr. Terrence Bryant is our director of. And I have really enjoyed the opportunity that I've had to be able to work with him really closely on Bible-based ABA, which he can expand on a little bit more. But so Full Spectrum ABA, we provide behavior analytic services for individuals with disabilities. The bulk of our clients range from ages 2 to 21, typically around 5, 6 to about 12, 13, by the time the child gets a diagnosis and they're ready to start therapy. And then our goal is always working to transition ourselves out to get the client to the point where they can be independent, successful, thriving members of society, and we are no longer needed. So always kind of trying to work ourselves out of a job, helping them to be successful. We embed ourselves in the client's natural environment. So we work with over 150 public and private schools across the state. We collaborate with daycares. We work with the clients and their families in their homes because we know how important families and parents really are in seeing the behavioral changes that we want to see with our clients and helping them to really be successful and thrive. Now, if we have a client who's engaging in some type of maladaptive behavior, they need some skill acquisition training in community environments as well. That is where we go. So library, park, birthday parties, churches, anywhere where there's a need. And of course, if religion is a value of if our family is a Christian family, we want to make sure that they can be included within their church, that we are providing the supports that they need to be successful across all environments, and churches and religious organizations particularly as well. And we have 10 different PhD level analysts who work within our organization who are available for consultation and support. They have caseloads out in the field. They're providing trainings to any community organization, to schools, to families, some foster care groups we've worked with before too, which is really important, and just helping to expand behavior analysis, improve the quality of lives of the individuals that we serve, and then even looking lifelong. So we are very active in hiring adults with disabilities to work with our company as well. And so we have several autistic advocates who have joined our company to be supported and supervised by us, as well as to have that sense of community with each other. So to know that they are not alone, they have a safe environment where their professional goals can be supported, We have an Autistic ABA provider forum where they disseminate information about their experiences to our providers and then to any providers in the field through our social media pages and our apps. And so just really looking at a comprehensive approach to improving the lives of individuals with disabilities. And then we also have looking at adult services too. We have a job training program, NTC, which is neurodiverse training in creative industries, really looking at training marketable skills for individuals with disabilities and removing those social components. So looking at marketing, web design, and development. And so that's definitely a passion of ours as well. And so Dr. Brian, if you want to take over, I know I can talk about full spectrum and our roles for a while, but if you can tell a little bit about, I guess, yourself and Bible-based ABA, that would be phenomenal.
Sure.
I just have to jump in for 1 second because people are asking in the chat. They're in Florida.
We are.
Everybody's like, wow, this is amazing. Where are you located? They're in Florida. Okay, continue.
Yep. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Dr. Bellotti, for the introduction. And thank you, Beth, for inviting us to the roundtable. And we just looking forward to some of the questions that we're going to be, fielding from some of the participants here. I'm Dr. Terrence Bryant, and I am the director of the Bible-based ABA program. As Dr. Bellotti alluded to, we have a number of programs that we've been working on. We provide services in the home and community settings at large. And one of those settings in terms of community integration that we've more recently been focused on is houses of worship in the church community, and how individuals that we provide services for, individuals with autism spectrum disorder, as well as other mental health disorders and disabilities, how they can be effectively served and integrated within the church community. So our mission in the Bible-based ABA program is basically to train community and local churches to improve their interactions and understanding of individuals with disabilities, and how to get them more involved within their respective houses of worship. The main goal is to aid those individuals with autism and other mental health disorders and overcoming some of the deficits they may face, and effectively integrating into church, whether it's being able to attend services or, because of sensory deficits that make it difficult for them, or behavioral deficits or communication deficits or things of that nature. So our overall goal is trying to come up with ideas based on ABA principles and how we can help individuals effectively overcome some of those deficits, overcome some of the behavioral problems that may occur as a result of that, and be able to attend services and even serve in their various areas of ministry within their churches. One thing we would, I guess it's not just one thing, but I guess the overarching thing we would like to be able to do is be able to provide churches, other ABA or mental health professionals who may attend churches as well, assistance through developing protocols and helping them understand ways in which they can effectively support their own houses of worship. I think Dr. Bellotti, Colin Streetman, who is our director of marketing, and myself, a common experience we talked about that led us to this was that in our own respective churches, we saw individuals struggle who had some of these with disabilities, who had some of these concerns, and it was difficult for them and their families to be able to access, and enjoy and access their religious services. So we thought about within our own respective houses of worship, we had a role in helping church members and on a minimal level work through some of those issues. And I used to work at I used to be a Sunday school teacher. So I had a lot of young children, and some of our children, we had a disabilities class that had some people who had these individuals who had these certain challenges. And I came up with, kind of short-term protocols on how we could, in terms of general strategies and specific to some of those individuals who had more specific needs, how they could be incorporated into Sunday school class, and how them and their families can attend a worship service. So we thought that this is an issue at large for many many people, many families. And it's not just our particular locations, but we're sure that this is something that families are impacted by at large. And I'm sure in your group, obviously, being the ministry who helps with disabilities and stuff like that, you're dealing with those things all the time. I'm sure we'll talk about some questions from some of the participants related to that. But that's sort of where the thought process of Bible-based ABA came from, and sort of the genesis of it, and sort of where our mission kind of started. And we just want to be able to expand those things, our knowledge base, and how we can help and assist, to the community at large.
Thank you. Thank you both for the background. I love that you've taken your professional experience and you, in your personal, being part of a church and as a part of your personal faith, you saw the need and that you're working towards meeting that need. So I want to point out a couple things in the chat. So Dr. Bellotti did share that they're also serving parts of South Carolina, Mississippi, Tennessee, and Georgia. So there's a few of you that are probably like, woo, I need to get in touch with them. And then some websites were shared, and we'll put these on our website in the show notes, but fullspectrumaba.com, BibleBasedABA.com. And then if you're interested in hearing more about the neurodiverse training and creative industry, which is a really cool thing, so I encourage you to check that out. It's ntici.com. Okay. We have some questions already in the chat, so I'm going to just get us started because I know we've got a lot of things that we want to cover. So what are some of the best methods you've seen to include children with disabilities to be included and involved within the children's ministry setting?
So, and I'll let Dr. Bryant kind of piggyback off of me, certainly. But for me, the best way is to have children included in, and especially children with disabilities included in any environment, including children's ministry, would be making sure that awareness is provided across the members of the church body, looking at patience and kindness and compassion, right? All of the values that we do hold as Christians, making sure that those are disseminated across all members and that we are working towards inclusion and really supporting each other and the families who have a child with a disability to be included. For myself, for example, I attend a church where from the second that I walked in the door, I had people welcoming me and just so excited for me to be there. And I want to make sure that those feelings of support and compassion are really shown for families who do have children with disabilities, because it's just so much more difficult to feel comfortable when you are dealing with your own battles. And we know that people sometimes remain out of church because they have different issues or challenges, and they might not feel comfortable or supported. So starting there, and then making sure that the teachers are trained, anyone leading ministry, if it's an educational group within the church. So we have at my church, Bible-based Bible Baptist Church, we have special instruction and services for the children. Now, the pastor who has been running it, he's also an educator and has reached out to Colin Straitman and I for different strategies and tools of how to meet the needs of the individuals with disabilities. We also can provide ABA therapy one-on-one in those environments, which can be helpful too. So if the family has identified and has obtained that level of support, allowing the RBT or therapist into the church environment as well can certainly be helpful. And I see that Colin Straitman has his hand raised and he would like to share.
Hey everybody, my name is Colin Straitman. I know that the two docs are the big experts in the behavior specialist realm, but I wanted to mention, I used to work with a group called the One Roof Initiative. It was in Tampa Bay out of Van Dyke Methodist, and they do not exist anymore, but they developed a buddy program, and a greeter would be paired with an individual who had a special need. And so they were part of the greeting of all new people that came to the church at the front door, and they had that partner there with them. And so it served as both a means of allowing them to connect with other members of the church, like Dr. Bellotti was mentioning, but also a chance to sort of develop their own social skills. We've seen other churches take approaches where they remove the social skill component, being that it's a little bit more difficult at times for certain members of this population, and they'll have programs, and that's kind of where ours falls on the neurodiverse training aspect of moving more to like the sound or video aspect of church service. So I just wanted to put those two out there. The One Roof Initiative, I thought that was a cool program that they had, but I can't find where they exist anymore. I can't find their website or anything. I was looking for them a few months back.
But I love the idea of partnering because that also gives individuals an opportunity to serve as well, which is so important. So thanks for that, Colin. Dr. Bryant, do you have anything to add?
Well, I know Dr. Bellotti kind of stole my thunder a little bit. I think that, you know, just having a welcoming environment for those individuals and families, as she was discussing, is very important. Number one, I mean, before you even get into any specific strategies or intervention, they got to feel like they're okay with their child being a part of the children's ministry and being able to come to church, and that they'll be safe and respected, and their needs will be addressed. But that starting there, but then maybe in general, having some general strategies in place ahead of time, because planning is very important. So what kind of general behavior strategies might be in existence? And this might be something where you will recruit the help of a professional like an ABA therapist. Say, hey, how about some general guidelines that we can apply, you know, to most individuals who may have some of these special needs, or maybe have some difficulties socially interacting. And then as you get to know children, tailor those general guidelines to more specific, individualized kind of interventions. So I think just having general understanding and training the Sunday school teachers in what is it like generally to look for good behavior or and reinforce it. What is reinforcement? How do I, you know, deliver reinforcement effectively? Because a lot of times what happens is we become reactionary to problems, and we don't engage in proactive responses. And then just having someone in general, as far as general application, engaging in proactive reinforcement responses. You know, hello, greeting the person at the door. Hey, you look nice today. I love your dress. I love your suit. Oh, you know, we're going to go over here. We're going to be working on this today, and kind of giving them prompting and anticipating, explaining ahead of time, and debriefing them or briefing them on what the expectations are, and taking up just general guidelines. And I think from there, as you get to know the children, you know, as they return and they're integrated into the ministry, you get to know specifically how to address specific needs as you learn the child. So, but I think that Dr. Bellotti and Colin kind of answered a lot of that question. And I hope I touched on a little bit too, that brought some clarity to it.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. And I'm sure we'll have, like, people can share very specific, hang on, let me mute this person. Okay. They can ask very specific questions if they have, you know, like really specific examples. I'm going to start with one though, yes, because this question came up quite a bit with people that submitted beforehand, and that is elopement or runners. So I'm going to read a comment, and so we'll use that as an example. Do you have any strategies to address a 6-year-old child's tendency to flee? During our respite nights and Sunday school, we have the exits blocked so we can keep him safe. We would love to be able to include this child in our VBS and regular Sunday school classes without fear of him running off.
Okay, I can start with that, Dr. Bellotti. So it sounds like the first order of business was to promote safety. So that's been taken care of by blocking eggs. That would always be number one.
Well, I think though that the situation is the exits can't always be blocked off. So they would like to include this child in settings such as VBS and maybe some regular Sunday school classes where you can't block an exit.
Okay, well, not knowing the child specifically and some of the motivations behind the behavior, I would say we would start at trying to identify why this individual is trying to, it sounds like a lot of times elopement behavior is escape motivated. It's not always, but in many instances it is. So it tends to have a more of a negative reinforcement function, meaning I'm trying to escape or avoid a situation I don't like. Sometimes it could be I'm trying to access a more preferred situation, which would be a positive reinforcement function. So, but in this case, let's presume that he's trying to escape. We want to identify environmentally if there are things, noise level, or things that is bothering the child, or things that they're very sensitive to, or if they're trying to escape, from if we find out that's what it is, or if it's something else that's aversive, how do we make the situation less aversive? In other words, does a child need a brief break? Sometimes if the child is in an environment that's a little aversive, they can only stand so much time at that situation. Can we incorporate scheduled breaks where the child can go for a brief walk or to another area for a few and just explain, we're going to come back, but I'm going to allow you to leave, take a break, and then we're going to come back. It really kind of depends on the function and the purpose, the motivation behind the need to elope. You would tailor your interventions around that. I think you would take some evaluation and assessment to determine, what that function of elopement would be. But those are some things right on the top of my head. Maybe that you would allow ahead of time, plan on brief breaks and brief escapes, inappropriate escape, as opposed to running off. Maybe if the child can communicate, hey, it's a little tough for me right now. Hey, I need a break. Or if they sign, or if they communicate some way or another, taking a break. So those would be very important things to look at, trying to determine the source of that, the motivation behind needing to elope.
So if in a church setting, if perhaps we don't have access to a specialist such as yourselves, so I'm hearing, kind of find out what the motivation is, and you mentioned some motivations: environment, wanting to do a preferred activity. In this case, the person that submitted the question is saying that they're pretty sure that he's doing it because he's seeking novelty. Which I guess would be considered a preferred activity. How can we, as maybe not professionals, but how can we help? How can we kind of assess that? Like, do you recommend, other than just observing, do you recommend talking to parents, not talking to parents? Do you recommend, do you have any strategies that we can use if we don't have access to a specialist like yourselves?
So if the individual is seeking novelty, that sounds more like more of a positive reinforcement function as opposed to escape. They're trying to go to an environment where, okay, I'm bored. Well, maybe I'm bored with that environment, or I want to do something else. So maybe just having a set of activities that, like, I would talk to the parents, obviously, to say, hey, what does this individual find motivating or reinforcing? And perhaps you can have a situation where there's a prescribed amount of time that the individual understands. Maybe you use a timer and say, hey, after the timer beeps, we'll go to the other area that you like and spend a little time there. And when the timer beeps there, we're going to come back to where the other kids are. Simple things like that to mitigate the need to escape, to access those novelty items or things that they would prefer to be a part of. Right. Just some kind of interventions like that, very basic. Hey, we know that Johnny likes this, and this, and I think he's seeking these things through escape. Just planning to have those things in place where we say, okay, Johnny, this is how much time we're going to be here. When you hear the beep, we're going to go, and you can show them the area ahead of time. Here's where we're going to go. This is where we're going to be at first, then we're going to go here, and then we're coming back. I think things like that. And then as you get to know the situation better, and also what you're wanting to do is require that time limit to be involved in the other activities that you want him to be in. As he becomes acclimated to understanding I can escape appropriately, increasing the required amount of time that he spends there gradually, and kind of fading the other area out, maybe not completely, because it's okay to want to be in a more preferred activity sometimes, but at least fading it to where you're spending less time in that novelty area, and you're enjoying actually, and more time in the area that he should be in, or this
Yeah,
that the program is going programming.
that makes sense.
Does that make
Thank
sense?
you.
Yeah.
I want to get to another question.
Okay.
And so what's being shared is we have a little friend who is 4, recent autism diagnosis, and is high functioning and will bang his head on the floor when he does not get his way. We are not trained to restrain and end up having to call parents. Any suggestions?
Yeah, and so I can start with this one, and then Dr. Brian, if you want to fill in, certainly. So the same way that we would address the elopement within the church is kind of the way that we would start with the self-injurious behavior as well. So looking at some antecedent interventions, what can we do to ensure that the client is safe? Blocking, you said you're not trained to restrain, but what about having a pillow? Or what about having something soft on the floor or in the general area that you could quickly move over just to protect his head or his or her head as a starting off point, and figuring out the why. So why is the behavior occurring? Is it sensory? If so, maybe the parents can seek out, they can get a medical appointment to see, is the client having headaches? Is there some type of sensation that the child is experiencing that they're trying to alleviate by banging their head? Sometimes a child will have a headache and we don't know that because they're not communicating with us. And so simply going to the doctor, that might be able to alleviate some of those issues. The other thing is figuring out, are they looking for attention? Are they looking to escape? What is happening right before the child is banging their head and immediately after? And of course, Dr. Brian and I are trained in conducting functional analyses and assessments and determining why behaviors are occurring. But simply by looking at what happened right before and after the behavior and consulting with a medical provider or someone else who might have some resources can be really helpful there. And open communication with the parent to say, again, hey, I'm here to support you. We see that this is a concern that's happening. What have you been able to figure out at home, or what have the teachers maybe been able to get work in other environments, and see if it'll work within the church environment.
Yeah, that's very good, Dr. Bellotti. And I think in the beginning you mentioned that when the individual doesn't get their way, that's when that behavior tends to occur. So that might give us a clue as to the function of the behavior. Even if the child makes a request and the request is denied, or they don't get something they want, they start to engage in the head banging. Of course, the first thing, as Dr. Bellotti mentioned, you want to promote safety so the individual doesn't injure themselves. Why you don't have a policy of restraining or blocking access with the head to the hard object, obviously something we want to try to do. Also, if the motivation is to, say, obtain a desired item or a desired outcome or whatever the situation is, when they don't get it, they tend to engage in the behavior. How can we proactively, understanding this individual tends to engage in that behavior in these situations, how can we proactively say, okay, teach them, they seem to be high functioning. I think you mentioned there was a 4-year-old who's pretty high functioning, maybe communicative, possibly as well. How can we teach them functional communication to request appropriate? And if you have to say no, can you always have 2 or 3 items that you can say yes to? Mm-hmm. So as alternative. And I think choices are very important in situations when you have to tell a child no. It should be not just no and there's no options, but it should be no, but this, and this are available, so that you have 2 or 3 options that you can always say yes to.
But there are options that are acceptable to the church setting.
Absolutely, yeah, no, yeah, but something that's within the framework of the church setting, absolutely. And again, a lot of that comes down to understanding the child. The parents have a wealth of information that about the motivations of their child and what they're motivated to get, and there might be valuable information in terms of reinforcer assessment, determine like what kind of options or choices can we have in place that we can say yes to. Mm-hmm. and have the child make because in life, we want them to learn how to live life. In life, we don't always get to do what we want to do when we want to do it. That's a valuable skill for them to learn early on, that I may not be able to do this now, but this is okay until I can do that. Sometimes the things they want are available later. It's not that it's never available. It's just in the context of right now and where you are, right now it's off limits, but you can choose this, or you can choose to wait till later. If I can explain to you that after church at 3, we will go right to do this, or if you can engage in some alternatives, you got other choices. Sometimes kids just want to have the control too. If you give them choices, they still have a sense of control of what happens and what they get to do. So I think choices are important in those types of situations.
So I'm hearing choices. I'm also hearing maybe communicating with the parents to know what
Absolutely.
some of the choices are that they can have after they're not in your setting. Thank you. I'm going to ask another
Absolutely.
question.
Yeah, we can't make assumptions that we know. Yeah.
Right. Okay, so here's another question that's in the chat. We have a child that loves video games. He will sit near the games the entire service so that he can be the first to play them during free time. When we try to engage with him, he says he hates church and doesn't want to be there. He will run out of the space, hit peers, say things that can be concerning and can be disrespectful to adult leaders. We've had conversations and can be, oh, sorry, everything just jumped. We've had conversations with parents who say there's no diagnosis and they have no suggestions for us, but they aren't surprised by what we've shared with them. What tips do you have to engage a disengaged kid? Is this attention-seeking behavior?
So it could potentially be attention-seeking behavior. It could also be access to that preferred item and activity, which is the device. And so to Dr. Bryan's point earlier about addressing the elopement, by setting specific intervals, determining the rate at which these behaviors are occurring, the child is engaging in the tantrums, and we're seeing he's being disrespectful to other students, other children, whatnot, figuring out how often is it occurring within the church service. So if it's occurring every 10 minutes, we want to start kind of at an interval that's just below that 10-minute. So let's say 7 or 8 minutes. We see, okay, they're sitting for 7 minutes. We give them access to the preferred activity, which is the device, short amount of time. Hopefully they transition appropriately back and they determine that this is a pattern that's going to occur. We're giving them the device every 7-8 minutes right before they would engage in those tantrum behaviors. And then we would extend it out to get them to the point where they can attend during the entire church service. Now, it might take some time. You might need to play around with the interval. And a lot of this is often brainstorming and figuring out for the individual client, for the individual child, what is going to work for them. But that's a starting off point that I would suggest.
Do you recommend like visual timers?
It depends on the client. In a church environment, I typically would suggest a visual timer. It helps, and really just in general, it helps the child to see when that time is going to run out. It doesn't work for everyone. And so really determining what is going to be best. You might have a child who sees that the visual timer, that sees that the time is going to be up. And then because of that, they know they're losing access potentially to the preferred item or activity if it's for that like iPad time. And then they start engaging in the behavior problem. Or they might know that the time is about to run up. And so now they're going to get what they want. And that might work really well. So it's really playing around with what the individual client might need.
Thank you. Dr. Bryan, do you have anything to add or should I ask the next question?
Yeah, I certainly concur with Dr. Bellotti. You can go ahead and ask this question because I know we got a number of questions.
Yeah, I know they're coming in fast and furious.
Yeah, I don't want to be long-winded.
All right, here we go. I've encountered several church leaders who are reluctant to give options because they see it as capitulation to bad behavior. How would you respond to that or help a leader discern the difference between simple rebelliousness and a sensory/attention-seeking behavior?
Okay. I think I'll take that one. So they feel like they'll be given into bad behavior by giving access.
Yeah, so now we're
things.
talking about
Is
how do
basically-
we train
Yeah.
our leaders, our
Right,
volunteers, yes. Mhm.
Yes, yes. I think just in general, if we train them in the sense of how reinforcement works, because many times, you know, people who are of the mindset, if I give them, well, they act out all of the time and this and that, you know, and I'm giving in and letting them have something they want, you know, they have a thought process of they're too focused on the negative behavior and they're not focused on looking for and reinforcing appropriate behavior or promoting it. So I would do some training on, you know, for the staff on what are my expectations of someone's behavior, say in church or in some particular area. What is the expectation? What is good behavior specifically? What do I expect? And what do I look for? And how do I reinforce it? Because I think it's more of a mindset on the part of the church leaders or anyone. It could be anyone. We're by human nature, we respond to problems. We don't respond to good, unfortunately. We don't look for good and respond to it. That's sort of like not how we're naturally wired. We're naturally wired to see bad behavior and figure out whether or not we're going to address it in some way or avoid reinforcing it. So I think it's more of a mindset. You know, I always tell people, I never had an officer pull me over to tell me that I was driving very effectively and I was driving into the speed limit and I used my turn signal appropriately. They'll pull me over if I'm doing something wrong. So human nature is I'm responding to problems. So we have to try to reverse the thought process of, well, I'm not going to get caught up in just looking for inappropriate behavior and deciding, oh, I don't want to give in to that, or I want to be, you know, firm against that. We want to look for appropriate behavior, define what that is specifically, and get into the habit of reinforcing it. It can start with a, hey, Johnny, I love the way you came in and sat down in your chair. If we're doing more of that, we tend to address problems, you know, on a less frequent basis. And I don't know if that totally answers your question, but I think it's a mindset thing, according to what you're talking about with, there's already a standoff thing with, I'm not going to capitulate and I'm not going to give in and I'm not going to, you know, I think it's more of a change of the mindset of those particular leaders, you know,
I like that.
In that regard.
Yeah.
And just to add, because I picked up on a statement that Dr. Bryant had made, and I'm not sure that everyone else might have, that descriptive verbal praise is really essential. And so when you're delivering descriptive verbal praise, when you are telling a child something that they're doing well that you want to see more of, typically what we'll do and what's suggested is you say the client's name, that way you know that they know you are speaking to them. You obtain eye contact or you have their attention in some way. You state what it is that you saw that you want to see more of. You're really paying attention to that specific behavior. You then are delivering some type of praise statement. So if you're saying, great job, I really love how you, something there, and then delivering with a smile, positive affect, you know, positive tone of voice. Those components are pretty important when delivering praise. So just to kind of point that out.
That's great. Thank you. I can see people taking notes. To follow up, so the person who posed the question was more about leaders not being willing to accept the philosophy of redirection. Since they say something like, well, there's one thing we're supposed to be doing right now, I won't give them options other than that.
And so to kind of, you know, answer that piece, it's really about, to me, it's about culture. It's about, you know, in the church, we are supportive, compassionate. We want to make sure that all families are included, and potentially if presented that way to the church leaders, they might be more willing to brainstorm and try some new options that haven't been attempted before and focus on the positive, especially if you explain how important it could be for that family and the rationale behind why we're doing it this way, why we want to try it. It's not about power or control. It's really about making sure that everyone can be supportive. And when explained appropriately, typically we've been pretty successful there.
Thank you. All right, I'm going to head into the next one because I want to get all of our questions in before our hour is up. We have a boy, so I'm reading a question. We have a boy who is minimally verbal and will pinch or strike a volunteer when frustrated. The motivation is often difficult to determine and certainly to predict in order to avoid. Parent is overwhelmed and has few recommendations. I'm thinking about asking if we can speak with school professionals to see how they're helping him, to see if we can piggyback. Other ideas?
So I absolutely would start with collaboration. If the parents are open to you speaking with the teachers, I am always eager to learn about what might have worked in another environment that can be adopted somewhere else. Then also, again, looking to see what's happening right before and after the behavior. Sometimes we're paying attention to a child, we're attending to that specific behavior without even noticing it. And so very subtle changes in your facial expression or in your tone of voice, naughty attention, which would be a reprimand or a correction in a different tone of voice, can also be really reinforcing for a maladaptive behavior such as pinching. Children sometimes will find it funny. It is often more enthusiastic than when a praise statement is delivered, and making sure that those either balance out or that the praise is a higher magnitude and has that, like, had the facial expressions and the tone of voice, and you're really engaged and animated, that can help combat some of that too.
Yeah, which is hard because if you've ever been pinched, you know it's hard to just like be calm about it.
Absolutely. And just ignoring as much as you possibly
Yeah.
can if the function is that attention, which sometimes and often it is.
Yeah. All right, let me get to another one. Well, actually, let me ask a quick question, because these are some that came in beforehand, and it kind of goes along with the pinching one, but hitting and spitting. So when those types of things are happening in the classroom.
Same thing, often blocking. Of course, we want to make sure that the other children who are in the environment are safe. Safety is always the utmost priority, making sure that everyone is okay and that the adults are able to block, because then it might require a more serious intervention, blocking, redirection, making sure that you are not inadvertently reinforcing those behaviors and kind of figuring out, why it might be occurring.
And I think very important too is it sounds like in the previous two ones you talked about, the common denominator or the common theme is lack of effective communication methods. I know the first one you mentioned, the individual had very limited communicative ability. So oftentimes individuals, they are communicating, they're just communicating ineffectively with inappropriate behavior, but it is a communication attempt. So how can we prompt and teach effective communication methods, to express whatever the desire is the individual is looking for, whatever outcome they're looking for, whether it be attention or whether it be access to something. Communication is not always with words. It may be a gesture that we teach them to utilize, or it may be something nonverbal if they don't have the verbal ability. But we do have to start somewhere and eventually build a communication repertoire that they can effectively use to obtain the outcomes they want. So, that might be a little longer term, but we got to start with something, even just saying, hey, just show me a finger, show me something that can indicate that you have a need or something you want. Yeah. So I think that's very important.
Yeah, along those lines, in the chat, it's shared, if a child doesn't have words to communicate, he or she may use behavior to communicate, which is what we just said. I love using pictures and simple sign language in the classroom with all the kids, especially in preschool. So yeah, and that's one of those things that can help everybody.
Yes.
It can also, and somebody else shared, it can be helpful for volunteers to understand that the options choices don't have to include something the child has demanded. The behavior can sometimes be avoided by providing two options. Do you want to build with blocks, or would you like to draw a picture? So yeah, it's all about giving them the power of having some choices. Absolutely. But again, it's the choices that are acceptable. We have a hand up. So Dr. Jans Reichen, I hope I said your name right, if you'd like to unmute.
Hi, thanks. This is Crystal. I'm calling from Texas. Good to see Dr. Bellotti. Thank you for doing this. My question is about coaching leadership or volunteers to communicate with parents when you have maybe a parent that is concerned of their children experiencing or sharing that space with a child who is engaging in maybe some aggression or harmful behaviors. And so you have other parents that become concerned for their children. What do you recommend in terms of coaching the church and having those conversations with parents?
Good question.
And so I've done a lot of work with parent training, and parents, as I mentioned it, they're really such an integral part of all of the work that we do and are so invested in the lives of their children, of course, because no one knows their child better than them. And they are impacted in such a great way by any type of maladaptive behaviors or issues that their children are experiencing. And so I always start from a place of compassion, letting the family know that we are here to support them and to meet their needs and to put the needs of the child, their child, and the other children first. And then we want to work together to come up with a solution so that everyone can be happy and successful. And Dr. Bryant, you can certainly elaborate if you have anything else to add. I'm trying to keep it a little brief.
No, I understand. I think it also starts with just sort of from the perspective, I think Dr. Bellotti alluded to this earlier, from a cultural perspective within the church organization. Like, hey, we have individuals who have certain types of concerns, that we're trying to incorporate or include in our church community. Sometimes we're gonna have those individuals are going to display certain behaviors, and we're working feverishly to try to help them and their families be integrated into our church community. We're all a family. And sometimes family members, have certain issues and concerns that we have to understand and then we have to help them with. But I would try to explain it to that parent from that standpoint, understanding and empathizing with their concerns about their own child being submitted to some of the things that or the problems that may occur as a result of this individual's challenges, but let them know that we have a concern for them, and we also have a concern for the families of those individuals who have these special needs and challenges. But I don't know if that approach, falls on deaf ears for the family who's saying, hey, I don't feel like my child is safe around this individual. But I just think that, we just got to ensure that or try to let them know that we're trying to promote a safe environment. We're also trying to promote an inclusive environment of everyone, and that that we're all kind of in it together. We're concerned about your family and your child as well as the individual that may be engaging in some of these problems. To maybe have them connect and empathize with that family of the challenging individual as well.
And hey, guys, I'm going to piggyback on that again. This is Colin, just because back with my time at the One Roof Initiative, I was impressed. They had both. Oh, and I see my camera's all messed up. They had both self-contained classrooms. I'm sorry about this. My camera, you can't see me, so I'll turn it off. They had both self-contained classrooms and they had inclusive classrooms. And so I think it depends on the size and strength of the church and what they can bring to the table, and so if it is a church that's trying to grow a new ministry, having that buy-in from the entirety of the congregation is going to be very important, especially if you're going to open it up to individuals who may not normally attend. And I know we're running out of time here, so I want to jump in too, that the gospel should always be the central focus. I know that Dr.
Yes.
Yeah, 100%. No. So we have an autistic missionary that we support named Ron Sanderson. He's got 15,000 Bible verses memorized in like the Book of Mark in English and in Greek. And so we are on our NTICI app. One of the tabs at the bottom says Autistic Missionary. And so someone can click that to get access to all of Ron's sermons and teachings and trainings that he has done that we have embedded on the app as well, so that any individuals on the spectrum or with neurodiversity at all who want to learn job skills will also have right at their fingertips the gospel So we're, big proponents of that. And I think part of the issue is that this is a unchurched population, the adults with autism, because there have been in the past so few churches that have taken on the mantle of being a disability ministry location. So parents find a dearth of opportunities to actually attend. And therefore, many of the individuals with autism have grown up unchurched, and they are not gospel hardened. Many of them haven't even heard the actual gospel, in some cases, fluently explained to them, let alone by another person on the spectrum.
Thank you for sharing that, Colin. That's huge. So first of all, Ron, yes, he comes to Inclusion Fusion Live, so many of you may recognize him, but what you said about what our overarching goal is to share the gospel. And we need to keep that in mind as we're having these discussions. So that's for us as people of the church, and as we talk about our ministries, that's our overarching goal. So thank you for bringing that up. Michael has his hand raised, and this might be the last one. We'll see. Michael, if you'd like to unmute.
All right, thanks. So just very briefly, in our disability ministry, we are running into the issue where we have about half of our students are higher functioning and are able to sit and kind of participate. Then we have about half who are lower functioning and may become a distraction to some. And so we've considered splitting the class where you have like the higher functioning class and the lower functioning class, but then we're also running into the issue of, will it look like you're somehow discriminating? And some parents may have some concerns about that. And so I'm just wondering, would you suggest us somehow split the class based on the functioning ability of a child, or would you suggest we keep, or the adult, or keep everyone together and just train volunteers? What would you suggest in that?
I could take this one because I have ran into a similar thing within our church. We had an all-inclusive kind of classroom, and the individuals with disabilities, had certain needs, and they had certain behaviors and acting out, and things that were distracting to the individuals who were on a higher level. We did split the class, where initially when the first segment of the service, they would go to their respective locations. And then we would have a couple of points throughout the service where there was an integration period. So we would have designated split classes that were assigned. This was the disability room. This was that was divided. But they always had a couple of periods where they came together for kind of a social personal thing to discuss the word and discuss what we were talking about in Sunday school. And then another one that was more just social, like a recess break kind of thing, where they got to play together and social together. But yeah, we did that because of the certain needs of the individuals who, had those challenges. And neither group was being effectively served with them being full-time together, but we found ways to bring them together during certain segments of the service period, if that makes sense. So I don't think it's a discriminating thing necessarily if it's effectively done to where the needs are met of both groups, if that makes sense. But I think just make it a point to integrate them at certain segments during your service. I think would be fantastic.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry we didn't get to talk more, because I hope we could do this again, because I know so many questions and we didn't get to a lot of them. But
yeah, I think
just
we
wanted
should.
to say that I've
Um,
enjoyed the opportunity, for sure.
Thank you. Back to Michael's question. A lot of times we talk about providing the least restrictive environment, which is kind of an educational term, but where they can best learn about Jesus. Mm-hmm. So that might look, different for different people. And so that's kind of how a lot of churches kind of figure that piece out. I'm going to read something from the comments. For some children with limited communication abilities, using objects, actual size or miniature, can be helpful for children to know what to expect and also to provide a means to choose. So I like that idea. Okay, we're out of time, people, but this has been awesome. And so I saw so many heads nodding during this, for those of you who had your cameras on. And I know people were taking notes, and yes, I think we should continue these discussions. So we'll definitely have you back. Just as a reminder, Key Ministry does provide this roundtable on the third Wednesday of every month. We have a great topic next month. It's potty talk. So you're definitely going to want to check that one out. But we do this every third Wednesday of every month. And then on the first Monday of each month, most months, we have our idea share. And that's just a time where we gather together and ask questions, encourage each other. We don't have a theme ahead of time, but you're all invited to come back for that. And so that's the first Monday of each month, but not on Labor Day. We're not going to do it in September. So, all right. Thank you very much to our guests from Full Spectrum ABA and for everybody for coming today. Have a great rest of your week, and thanks for joining us.